finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Okay, buckle up, kids. Cinch up those seatbelts. Pull down the restraining bar because the roller coaster is about to leave the station. We have
a special episode today.
Yes.
This is not our usual Thursday drop.
No, we believe the information contained in this episode is so absolutely unbelievably mind-blowing that we're like, we have to get it out, and we have to get it out right now. We have Sasha Latypova with us. Wow, a courageous pharma insider who worked in the pharma industry for about 25 years. She'll explain the details of what she's done, what she's owned, how she knows these things, and she went through about 400 pages of Pfizer's released information from the FOIA request and wrote a wonderful paper that came out on April 26th describing why they have committed numerous frauds. So that sounds too crazy to believe. We will let her explain it, and we will source this with the original notes, all 400 pages, and her synopsis. So without further ado, here we go. Back again for another week of infotainment. We are unbelievably privileged to have Sasha Latypova with us today. She has worked in the pharmaceutical industry in the research end for about 25 years or so, and I came across an article that she had published on April 26th, so just a short time ago, claiming fraud from Pfizer with regards to the production of their mRNA vaccine. So I'm like, you had me at fraud. And so I was like, my goodness, we have to try to talk to this person and see, is this a credible accusation? And if it is, it truly changes the entire game plan with regards to mRNA vaccines, the federal government, the FDA. The implications are immense. So Sasha, welcome to BS Free MD, and please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to meet you both. And my background is I graduated from Dartmouth's MBA program. And even before that, but after graduation as well, I worked primarily in pharmaceutical research and development in various roles as a consultant, and then also as a consultant to big pharmas in R&D and IP strategy. And then also later on, I co-founded my own companies, and I had 3 companies, which I subsequently sold. They were very successful, and I retired from the industry in around 2015. I do some consulting still, but I don't work full-time anymore. And yeah, so I run companies in the area of clinical trials, which is not a lot of people realize, but pharma companies don't do much themselves in terms of R&D, and especially clinical trials. They hire contractors. My companies were such contractors. We had some specific technical capabilities that we were providing and collecting data from all over the world, different clinical sites, and then processing it in a very strict framework as far as regulations. So that's why I'm familiar with regulations very well. And we were supposed to compile data submitted to FDA, often on behalf of the sponsor. I also interacted with FDA, specifically with their safety pharmacology division. So I also understand how FDA is supposed to look at things. And that's my background.
No, that's outstanding. Yeah, that is a point that very few people understand, which is the big pharma company is essentially a production and marketing entity. So they want to bring a product to market. They want to market it, sell the heck out of it. And so they farm out to contractors, companies like you owned, to do a lot of essentially the sciencey stuff, the basic science, the research, the setting up of the trials. And so obviously,
I think a lot of people didn't really realize that until, of course, they maybe heard Robert Malone's interview on Joe Rogan, where he really dove into that a lot and explained that that's where he came from too, and really laid that out really well.
So you personally, though, had a massive interest in making sure trials are done correctly. Regulators are satisfied knowing the FDA rules as far as safety monitoring, et cetera, in and out, because that's your livelihood. You're out of business otherwise.
Exactly. It was extremely strict. So people often say, just blanket terms, FDA is corrupt. It's a revolving door between FDA and pharma companies, and they're cozy with each other. And they're saying it's all bad and always was bad. And yes, while there was corruption for sure, and there were various forms of coziness with the regulators, or pushing drugs off label and trying to make physicians into their drug pushers by giving them gifts and trips and things like that. That existed. But between 2014, when I left the industry, and when I looked at it again in 2020, there's a huge difference. Nothing like this has ever happened before. To me, that was very shocking. With my knowledge of the industry and knowing little deals and stuff like that, I was still shocked. And I just cannot even fathom how this happened, when this happened, what exactly happened. But I realized very quickly that there was a massive amount of fraud being committed. And then initially it was from our analysis of VAERS data by manufacturing batch. It was immediately obvious that these are not manufactured to good manufacturing practices. There's something really bad going on. And then later on, when Pfizer documents started being released under FOIA, we saw direct confirmation to what we were suspecting, that there is massive amounts of fraud going on.
So what took you, so you've been retired and just doing some consulting. What kind of led you down this investigative pathway? Was it your own curiosity and following what's been going on in the media? Was it part of the consulting? Like, how did that evolve?
Yes, it's very interesting. From early 2020, from about April or May, it became clear to me that this pandemic is a scam when they started suppressing hydroxychloroquine, because I also know that it's a very safe drug and it's been successfully used. And the things that they were telling about it, especially with regard to safety, that was my area of expertise. And I was, this is just nonsense, okay? And I realized that this was a scam, and I just didn't do anything, didn't follow any rules, never wore a mask, and just tried generally to ignore it. Now, when they started talking about the vaccines, I also happened to know the class professionally from about 10 years ago, and I was also in disbelief because they were gene therapies. I knew that these are gene therapies, and I also knew that they wouldn't even dose healthy volunteers with them in clinical trials because they were so dangerous. It's like chemotherapy, essentially. So you wouldn't give it to a healthy, normal volunteer because it's unethical. And now they're pretending these are vaccines and going to give it to children and pregnant women. And I was just, I knew, okay, this is really bad. And I was on Telegram group. I became a moderator again because of my expertise, a very large Telegram group. They invited me to be a moderator. And then one person there came in and said, oh, there is information on manufacturing lot numbers for vaccines in VAERS. And I didn't know that. And I was like, okay, we can do some interesting analysis. That's how I started, maybe toward the fall, maybe September, October of 2021. I started looking into this analysis of adverse events recorded in VAERS database, which is Vaccine Adverse Event Recording System, maintained by CDC, and started looking into how these adverse events spread by manufacturing lot number. And that was a humongous analysis. I got in touch with a number of people, about 6 to 8 people total, who were working on it and helping. And we even built a website. And we got a lot of very interesting findings already indicating fraud. And then from there, it continued.
Okay, so let's just rewind that just a little bit. You were looking at lot numbers, so essentially batches of vaccine, and correlating the batch of vaccine to the VAERS reporting or the side effects. Yes. And what you found was that certain batches were really bad. There was some really worm-eaten apples in the apple bin, so to speak. So if you got a vaccine from batch A, you may have had virtually zero risk of side effects. If you got it from batch F, those were the people that potentially had clotting or myocarditis or all of these things that we know are vaccine side effects. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And the difference was so huge. And I also, first thing I did was, because in any scientific or data analysis, you would like to have a control. First thing I did, I looked at flu vaccines. Okay, I looked at flu vaccines for over a long period of time because that data is also in VAERS, and it's also has manufacturing lot numbers for flu vaccines. And I developed a baseline. This is how a well-produced manufacturing product should look like, by which I mean you can have different thoughts about flu vaccines. Some people say they're bad and not necessary, and some people prefer them. That's fine. But the product always should be the same as far as its toxicity profile, right? So whatever product you're like, if you're prescribing a medicine to somebody, that medicine, if it says 200 milligrams, it's supposed to contain 200 milligrams of active ingredient in every pill or injection or whatever. And it shouldn't have a vastly different profile. So one day you dose somebody with this medicine and everything is fine, and the next day you have a death or a severe anaphylactic shock or something. And then you take another batch and all of them die. And and that was like, the data was showing like that. And to me, that says this product is first of all very dangerous. Second of all, not produced to good manufacturing practices because the lots are not the same at all. There were differences, gigantic amount of orders of magnitude. For example, per lot, we had some lots that were about 6,000 adverse events reported, 1,500 severe, including deaths, 200-300 deaths reported per one lot. That's just unprecedented. And then some that had pretty much nothing, 0 or 1. And that's a humongous difference. For flu vaccines, they are all below 10 adverse events per lot. And there are some outliers, but nothing was ever higher than like 37 adverse events per lot.
Is that a standard that's used in manufacturing, or once the medications have been produced and we see the package inserts and possible side effects and things get reported over time, do they do that, monitor the VAERS data, compile like the similar algorithm to see if things are consistent amongst the manufacturing? Is that a way to find consistency among the manufacturing lots and make sure that it's not terrible quality or something's happened in the quality production? Is this a standard kind of way to monitor?
Oh yeah, okay. Absolutely. Both manufacturer and the FDA, CTC, all the monitoring they do. Part of it is this. It's about manufacturing, and this was so blatantly obvious, and nobody would acknowledge it. Nobody would do any recall. So whenever something like this is detected, you have to do a recall immediately. Right. You have to stop the production line and determine what happened. None of this was happening. In fact, only one lot was recalled in Orange County of Moderna. So one lot of Moderna recalled by Orange County alone. And because they had an excessive amount of severe adverse events, but that lot continued to be sold throughout the United States until it ran out.
What?
Yes. Nobody else recalled that lot. That's just staggering to me.
No, it is. I have to sometimes put this into automotive terms because that's one of my passions. And this is, if you figured out
exploding tires.
If you figured out that every single Cadillac Escalade that was made on a Friday between date X and date Y randomly exploded its airbag when you were driving 62 miles an hour. And if that happened twice, they would pull every single car off. Every single car would be pulled. Everyone would get a recall, and they would figure it out, and they would fix the problem.
Exactly.
Okay? And this is, it's not every car that was made on Friday. It's every car that was made for 2 months had randomly exploding airbags when you drive 62 miles an hour. And we knew it. And we knew it to the point where, one of the most populous counties in the entire country pulled it, and no one else followed suit.
And no one else, yeah. So this somehow did not. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
So this did not somehow alert the FDA or manufacturer that they're having an issue and they need to look into it. I was shocked. And this is a new experimental product. A manufacturer, like they can do recall themselves, voluntary recall, and most manufacturers do voluntary because of the PR problems. And obviously nobody wants to hurt their customers, except it seems in this case. And so most of the time manufacturers will do recall voluntarily, but FDA can force recall. They have that power. And none of them did anything.
So I guess I'm thinking what people are going to be asking that aren't in the medical field or even that are, because what we've been hearing is when things happen, us as physicians should be reporting to VAERS, which there's even that problem, trying to convince colleagues, this is significant, you should report it. No, I did some reporting. It's onerous, and I can see why a lot of people secondarily wouldn't want to do it. So this is too much work. I'm not sure this is a side effect. But the next step is once it's in the system.
Then they tell you, okay, that if you report incorrectly to VAERS, then it's essentially, I'm not sure if
we're liable.
Then we're liable for that, or it's a felony or something. I can't remember if it's, I don't want to wrong, but essentially
it's like the doctor's fault.
It's your problem. If you do this incorrectly or, fraudulently, then it's like Medicare fraud or whatever, which would be a felony. So you sit there and you go, okay, so I've got 25 people in my waiting room because I'm working in a super busy urgent care. They're all sick. This person had a vaccine 4 days ago, has a side effect that might be related to the vaccine, and it's going to take me 25 minutes to navigate VAERS to put the actual side effect in. So am I going to do that and potentially be at risk of fraud, or am I going to say, no, I'm going to see the other 24 people
and then just pass it on to the next guy, send them to the ER or someone, the cardiologist, they'll do it. But there's that initial step. Where my brain was going is once it's in the system, and once I reported and thinking, then what is the critical number? Is there a number, or is it based on data, a statistical analysis, as it's now statistically significant that there's certain amount of side effects with this batch? Like, how do they reach that number, that decision-making process, that there's a problem with this lot?
I don't know what thresholds they have, but I would, once you get, in statistical terms, I would say once you get 2 standard deviations away from the mean of the flu vaccines, because again, which would be, somewhere on the order of, 30 adverse events. And then you also can look at different severity and how that looks. Because what public has been sold, it's vaccine. So vaccine, meaning something really safe like a flu shot. And now everybody's mind, it's a flu shot, okay? Especially at the beginning, not anymore. But at the beginning, everybody's lining up because, what's a vaccine? It's very safe. And then CDC and FDA going propaganda, it's safe and effective. When it's EUA, you cannot even say that it's safe and effective. For any other drug, that would be illegal to say that. But here, they're pushing it as safe and effective. So I would say the threshold with that messaging should have been something that needs to be close to flu vaccines. And not only like under that sort of 30, 40 adverse event benchmark, but also every lot needs to look the same, about the same. And they will not. They're all over the place.
Right. But the thing that blows my mind is you'd think that they would be, this should have been, and it probably was in the boardrooms of these companies, the holy hell, what just happened? Because this is an atomic bomb from a side effect perspective when you look at that, because people have to remember the practicalities of these vaccines. So they produce them, they're novel. You have the lipid nanoparticle with the piece of mRNA that's shoved inside of it. It has to be stored at minus 85 degrees or whatever it was. So there's tons of logistical problems. So you'd be really nervous. It's not a flu shot where you can just store it in a fridge for 2 months. And so there's all these logistical problems of it has to be cold enough to transport, then it has to be thawed at a certain time, that it has to be used. So you should be expecting, just using common sense, that there's going to be some issues where you're going to have some vaccine that stayed out too long and isn't going to do anything because it's been destroyed because it's too warm, and other stuff that maybe. So this should have been absolutely at the forefront of their minds as far as looking for a bad outcome.
Oh yeah. And they had the database, their own database, vSafe, which was later available only by FOIA. Like, we had to sue for that data. They were trying to hide it. But we know that by February, they knew they had over 1,000 deaths. This is incredible.
February
they had to have known.
February of 21.
Yeah, February of 21, they knew they had already over 1,000 deaths. The median of those deaths was below 24 hours. People were dropping dead right away, almost at the site. And they knew it, and they continued. So nobody put a stop to it, nobody investigated, nobody recalled any lots. And that to me already became confirmation. This is purposeful. It's not incompetence, it's not something they didn't know. And it's incompetence, fraud, and huge crime.
And all the things we heard about people dropping dead at the sites were few and far between on mainstream media. And of course, it was this is propaganda. This is a coincidence. The few things that few incidences that occurred, or they had an underlying problem has nothing to do with the vaccine. And that was really whooshed under the rug really quickly.
Yeah.
The initial severe reactions.
No, it's just okay. Like already,
I don't even
already,
know if I remember hearing about recalls. Do you in Orange County ever?
Now I'm almost wishing I didn't have coffee because I'm getting exercise. I'm getting a little exercise too. But
it's time for Doc Dale's.
Yeah, it's time to go straight to the vodka at this point, and it's like 9:30 in the morning. So let's move on to, you got your hands on, what is it, the first 410 pages of the FOIA requested data directly from Pfizer. As a little bit of a recap, Pfizer we're trying to slow walk the release of their actual hard numbers, where it's going to take, 75 years to release all of the information. That alone
That alone requires a little bit of just unpacking. Like, why does a drug company not release their data and their information for 75 years?
It's even more interesting than that. It's not Pfizer who was fighting that. It was the FDA. So I read the transcript from the court when this hearing took place and the judgment, and it was DOJ lawyers on behalf of FDA versus Aaron Siri was doing the FOIA request. And in the transcript, it's evident. So even the judge asked a question, why is DOJ lawyers arguing on behalf, because they were arguing, saying that, this compromises trade secrets of Pfizer and things like that. And the judge was, why are DOJ lawyers defending commercial interests of Pfizer? And why didn't Pfizer intervene in the lawsuit? Pfizer wasn't even on the lawsuit. They did not. And Aaron Siri replied that they're used to government defending them. So they were so comfortable with this, they didn't even send their lawyers in.
There's a name for this. It's called fascism. When the government and massive corporations are literally spooning in bed, that's fascism. And there's no other name for it. That's the definition. And it's mind-blowing. So thank God, literally, for FOIA.
Yes.
Because we got, now, how much of the, 10,000 pages in the initial study? Something like that?
Yeah, there was 10 and then some more, another 10. Now it's over 90,000 total, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So essentially it's a light summertime beach read.
That makes Atlas Shrugged look like nothing.
But there are ways to accelerate it. My team actually built a search tool to search through them quickly by keyword and without downloading documents, and I've distributed to a number of law firms and groups that are looking into this. So we have ways to search it faster.
So is one of the keywords horseshit?
Yes, that's one of them. And in fact, I did some interesting experiments. Searched, for example, this package of non-clinical studies, which was supposed to be all the safety-related evaluations for Pfizer. It's around 450 pages. I searched it for the word cardiovascular safety or cardiovascular, and there are 0 hits in that.
What?
Yes, 0.
So your paper that came out on the 26th of April, was that based on the first 400 pages or something like that?
Yes, so this was a little bit different. So it's part of the same FOIA process, except this was done by Judicial Watch separately from Aaron Siri. And they requested, so Aaron Siri was just his lawsuit. The judge ruled that they will just supposed to release so many pages per month. Judicial Watch, I'm sorry. So
hey, they want to have a say too. The doodles want to have a say on the podcast too.
We love the doodles.
And so Judicial Watch requested module. So these submissions go by modules. And this was specifically, it's called non-clinical assessments, which is all of their studies that they do before they go into human clinical trials. And this includes bench experiments, cell lines, validation studies, animal studies. And specifically for vaccines, although for this is a drug, I'm not calling it vaccine, it's an injection drug. Specifically for vaccines, all safety assessments happen in that stage. in the preclinical stage. They don't really in the clinical trials, they never really study safety because they believe these generally safe products. It's just that's not the nonsense that
they think that by the time they're putting it out that it's safe based on what they found in the lab. Right.
Yeah, exactly. But at least if they're using that argument that they're vaccines, they were supposed to have studied safety completely in that stage. And that's why they requested this package. And the package is supposed to be how FDA read it. It's supposed to be organized in a way that was submitted to the FDA and FDA reviewed when they were making their decision.
Okay. So your article is about the preclinical, essentially safety studies or safety studies that were supposed to exist. And you break this down piece by piece. You have 7 bullet points in the table of contents of the article and about how really none of the safety studies were done. They used different batch lots and said it was the same batch lot. It's just crazy. So let's go through point by point these contentions, because we've said this a lot. We said we know there's a lot of insanity that's gone on in the last 2 years, but when it's fraud, that means it's intent. That means that they knew better and they did it anyways, and they did it for a reason. And so that's a higher burden of proof than we were just incompetent and we were drunk at the time. That's a different level.
Yeah, or rushing things through and then making mistakes that were not a series of inconsequential things that happen, leading to airline crashes and things like that. But
So number one, Pfizer's program did not include a comprehensive end-to-end test of all components of the final approved product. The studies included in the approval package were for a variety of versions of the product with no comparability assessments. Thus, no comprehensive assessment of product safety can be made. Can you explain that a little bit to us?
Yeah, so that kind of jumped out at me immediately when I saw what they were doing in the protocols and throughout. Even the FDA fast track letter, and nobody's aware of this as far as doctors or patients. Everybody thinks vaccine is one product. It's not one product. There are in the IND, which is investigational new device application that the manufacturer opens with the FDA when they start clinical trials, they were allowed to include 4 different categories of vaccine, including spike protein by itself, not mRNA, not RNA, not nothing, just spike protein by itself in lipid nanoparticles. And then 3 different categories of mRNA were included. The standard unmodified RNA, as they're claiming, then modified RNA, and then something that they call self-amplifying RNA.
I don't like the sound of that already.
All of that is included under single IND. That was never allowed before. Never. In fact, there is current, pretty recent FDA guidance, specifically on the topic of testing multiple versions of a product in a clinical trial. And the FDA states that, yes, you can test multiple versions of a product in a clinical trial, but you're supposed to open IND for each one of them. And then they make a footnote saying that this doesn't apply to products intended to treat or prevent infectious disease.
Okay, I could see how they could make a stretch to say it's not intended for products that are emergency use authorization, perhaps, because it's like we got to rush some version, but not intended.
So was that a new regulation? Because that just seems completely nuts.
Yes, it's completely nuts, and I believe it's from 2020. It's very recent, so it may be even in a draft form right now, but it's very recent, and it's clear why they wrote it that way. It's clear why they included this footnote, and it has no scientific basis, no databases, no precedent even. And why would you exempt, first of all, these products intended to prevent infectious disease? Also, in the early clinical trials, we don't often know what the drug is going to be for. The indication is not known. They're tested for multiple indications. And if I, as a manufacturer, just declare that, I'm also going to prevent infectious disease, then I can do all this. So
no,
what?
No, it's crazy, and that's an interesting bullet point. I don't want to get sidetracked, but it's an interesting bullet point for our listeners that don't understand drug manufacturing. Is that tons of drugs are produced, and we don't really know what they do. Okay, we have an idea. Okay, like this,
Mm-hmm.
we know that drug A worked in HIV. So if we can make a subvariant of that or a drug that's similar in family to that, it might work for HIV. And then they start studying it and they go, it doesn't really work for HIV, but it does this amazing thing for liver cirrhosis.
Mm-hmm.
And they find it by accident.
Right.
And so they go, we own the patent on this drug, so let's study it in this other way. And this happens all the time. And actually, Paxlovid and Molnupiravir are, I've told patients this a bunch of times, they're the Austin Powers of COVID drugs because they were sitting on the shelf as failed HIV drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And the companies dust them off, maybe change the molecular structure slightly, study it in COVID and go, let's see if this one sticks to the wall. So this stuff happens. It's a standard thing that happens in drug manufacturing.
It happens all the time. Famous examples, Viagra was developed for blood pressure. It was in development as a blood pressure medication. And when they discovered this interesting side effect, they changed and they approved it for that. Also, you can, at this point, market Pfizer injection as a replacement for Plan B contraceptive. It causes 82% abortions before 20 weeks. So that's how they find these side effects. Some of them are good and some of them are bad, and that's how they eventually purpose their drugs. Now, hydroxychloroquine is an antimalarial. It has been used for lupus and autoimmune diseases off-label, and that's normal. That's normal for all kinds of drugs that have been approved. Once a drug is approved for one indication, it's approved. Also, people were fed this BS that, you cannot prescribe hydroxychloroquine for this because it's not approved for this. It doesn't have to. It's approved. Once it's approved, it can be used depending on doctor's opinion and existing literature, which was a ton of it was existing. It can be used off-label based on physician's discretion.
Oh, yeah, all the time. I think even most common listeners know that there's, simple things like cardiac medications can be used for migraine prevention. And people who have migraines know that, this is a heart drug, but this beta blocker, I can take it every day because it helps prevent my migraines. That wasn't the initial intent. And it's not, we're not going to approve it for your migraines because it's not approved for that, but we can, so it just doesn't make sense.
Right. And
unless there's a bigger nefarious thing.
Right. And case in point, I know for some men, Viagra works really well for anxiety.
You're Jesus. I'm like, what? Oh, brother.
So,
that's a whole different track.
That was, sorry, didn't mean to throw a grenade.
But you're right. So people put A and B together. If you can use, they know that you can take medications off label, that amitriptyline works for various different things, etc. as well.
Amitriptyline has not been used on label since the 80s.
So it just made sense to the lay people. This makes no sense that we can't take hydroxychloroquine if we want to see if it will help prevent COVID because it's safe. It's been safe forever. It makes no sense.
But the whole point of off-label drugs is that once they're approved because they're deemed safe. So then it becomes clinical judgment on the effectiveness. So then it's clinical judgment. The FDA has done its job because they've said this drug is safe. Or if it's not just safe, but we also know where its side effects are, where its complications, where its drug-to-drug interactions are. So you can, so there's this net of safety around it. So go have at it, figure out how to, that's the practice, the art of medicine. So in this, they were actually, so they got four different drugs under one new drug application. Correct.
Yes, exactly. And also I later found a separate note from European Medicines Agency, which is in the European Union equivalent to the FDA. And their reviewers stated very clearly that this particular molecular entity, the mRNA encoding for spike protein in lipid nanoparticle, was extremely novel. So they have 2 paragraphs describing how novel it is, that it's not like this, it's not like this, it's not like any known chemical, it's not like any known family of chemicals. So it's out there by itself, completely new, novel. There's no precedent to it.
Which never studied in a lab type of novel?
It was studied in the lab, but nothing that's ever been approved and on the market.
Okay.
So it's not similar to anything that's ever existed on the market. Therefore, the absolutely most strictest guidelines for safety testing should apply in this situation. And you cannot just test multiple versions of it. You have to test a specific, very exact formulation throughout, from cell lines into the humans, but it has to be exactly the same.
The other interesting part of that, and I had this conversation with tons of friends and patients, I said, look, the issue with approval of a preventative agent is the burden of proof is orders of magnitude higher. If you have an untreatable cancer or an untreatable any kind of lethal disease, that whole right to try thing, you'll do whatever it takes because you're going to die anyways. So obviously the burden of safety and the burden of effectiveness is much lower. When you're trying to prevent something, you're by definition giving a drug to people that aren't sick. So it has to be extra super duty safe because you don't want to make people sick that wouldn't have got sick. And so I said, it's really complicated to get this stuff approved because you have to essentially vaccinate a bunch of people and then wait around for enough people to get the infection that A, it's still safe, and B, it's effective. That happened in 4 months. And the initial Pfizer study only had 207 infections. 100, and I'm like, so they do a study on 70,000 people and they have 200 infections. Why would you give a crap about a drug like that?
Exactly.
It means nothing. The data means nothing.
So when I read that first summary that they submitted to FDA in December 2020 about this trial, right? And so I read this statistic, and my conclusion was you cannot say anything about the vaccine because you have too few cases. It's statistically insignificant. But they've proven definitively that COVID is not dangerous.
Right.
They
because
they had talking points.
But it wasn't even manipulating the numbers. By their own numbers, less than 1% of people got COVID. So who cares? Why would you give a
nobody
novel
died.
No, nobody.
Why would you give a
Nobody died
novel
of COVID.
to something that affects 1% of the population and kills virtually nobody unless they're over 80? That was their own data.
That's by their own data because the majority of that study, they excluded older people. These were people below 65, and generally healthy because they had to go through screening criteria. But they were looking for people who are likely to get infected, like healthcare workers and people living in other around high density population, using public transportation, stuff like that. So they were trying to get more cases in that study to do it faster. They excluded very old people, and they found that it's not dangerous at all.
Right. So let's do a vaccine and give it to everyone that doesn't need the vaccine because we studied it on everyone that doesn't need the vaccine. And the old sick people with a million medical problems, will exclude them because they're going to die anyways. So it's just it's hard not to hear the clown car circus music going on right now. It's so crazy.
So back to that first point then, do we basically anticipate that what you're saying is, so there's four different substances technically that are now part of one IND application. And does that mean they then, when they produce these vaccines, could potentially contain four different types of ingredient? Or am I going down?
Yes, it's possible. It's even worse than that. So those are four categories. And then throughout, when I was reading the documents and even their clinical trial protocol, to which they made 14 amendments, and the clinical trial protocol became 2,400 pages alone. So throughout these amendments, they were removing and adding new versions. So new subversions. So the initial ones were, think of it as categories, and then each category can produce infinite number of subversions. And there was one, so they eventually by Amendment 5, they said we're right now not studying the self-replicating one, but they did dose people with it, especially I know for sure in Germany. And we're not studying the unmodified one. We're going to continue with the modified one that they're now claiming is approved. But then in the last amendment, they also added, but there were multiple versions of that modified RNA. So there was 162B1, 162B2. Within those, there were different versions, V5, V8, V9. And then by Amendment 14, they added yet another version of the B category, which is called a South African specific variant. And nothing is explained, like how are they different from each other? Where is the comparability data? How do the results from your previous work that you're now submitting using, let's say, B1 version, which was done in phase 1 clinical trial, how do they compare to the B2, which was used in the phase 2 and 3 clinical trial? None of this is explained. There's no comparability assessments. They're just saying, don't worry about it. They're about the same. This is just a new variety of the same thing.
And is this all coming from different labs around the world, or is this all these subvariants? The world is basically trying to roll out this as fast as possible. Is there multiple labs that have been studying this technology, or is it basically one you can make in one lab that's responsible for most of this investigation that's contracted out with Pfizer, and then they come up with these slightly different variations and enantiomers of something? Do we know that, or is there no way to know?
It's hard to say. Their manufacturing is all over the world. They have a lot of subcontractors. As far as I understand, this making the active substance, they have several different, in the US and in Europe, several different plants, their own and the subcontractors. And they will just specify some kind of a code in the computer, essentially. So they'll say it needs to code for this, and they call it some variant 3, 4, and they outsource it to the supplier who is making that, and they ship them the active substance.
Okay. So where it's made really isn't essential, as if it's made with consistency, supposedly. What's happening is now they have all these different variations that we think are supposed to be one.
So to dial this back and to put it in automotive terms as a metaphor, this would be if you're General Motors and you make a whole bunch of different vehicles, you make pickup trucks and you make small cars and you make sports cars and whatever. You have to crash test every single vehicle, and you have to crash test it in a bunch of different ways. So this would be essentially like General Motors taking the C8 Corvette, crash testing it and saying, yeah, the pickup trucks are safe.
Exactly.
You don't understand. Okay. That's a 3,500-pound sports car with 600 horsepower, and that's a gigantic 6,500-pound pickup truck. No, they both have 4 wheels, and they're both manufactured by General Motors. So just trust us. You'll be fine.
Or more specifically, they're taking the parts in that Corvette and changing the tires and wheels or the brake fluid, and you don't know what you're getting, and then saying, "Oh, this one seemed to work pretty good," but when you
it's about the same.
you can put whatever it in. You can put in. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Exactly. And they can conjure up these versions at any time. That's the most concerning part. So going forward, they have ability, and the FDA agreed with them that they can just make these versions and insert them into the lipid nanoparticle platform and don't do any testing and just release them to the market. And that's the biggest deception about these products, that they pretend that all safety resides with the lipid nanoparticle, or all risks reside with lipid nanoparticle, and none with the payload that's being delivered. It's like saying all safety needs to be tested in the car in the tires. And all cars have tires, and therefore we only need to test tires. Nothing else needs to be tested. And we can just replace whatever else between the tires.
Like the pre-1964 non-collapsible steering columns that would take your head off in a 15-mile-an-hour collision. So let's not go back to that.
Yeah.
So speaking of the payload, the toxicity of the COVID-19 vaccine's mRNA active ingredient were underlined, never studied. Okay.
That's a big...
that one, I honestly am going to the kitchen and getting tinfoil because I'm like, I need to make a hat. Like, they never studied the actual, essentially the atomic bomb inside the missile.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
So and how do we know that? Yeah.
So that's in the documents. So they made that claim that only lipid nanoparticle has potential for risks or whatever. So that's what we're going to study in the biodistribution, and then in safety assessments, toxicology assessments, right? So what happens, just to step back, like what happens in the safety assessments that you're supposed to design? You're supposed to study what's called primary pharmacology, which is everything to do with the mechanism of action of your drug, in which they did study mRNA, but those are efficacy endpoints. They're not safety endpoints. They're just proving in those. So in that, they included the payload. And they studied, like in several studies in animals, which I'll get back to. There were also some deception there, but at least they studied that. But they were only looking at, does it elicit the antibodies and what does it do for disease enhancement? So those are all efficacy-related endpoints. They're not safety. Then in the safety category, we're supposed to study first biodistribution. So first you have to look at where in the body the drug goes. Once you dose it, whatever way, like is it a pill or if it's an intramuscular injection, how it goes through the body, where it ends up, and what organs. Then once it gets, when we detect something in the organs, when it gets there, we also need to assess what does it do. Is it benign or is it dangerous? And we are supposed to characterize, ideally exclude risks to major organ systems like cardiovascular, hepatic, CNS, ideally exclude those risks or at least characterize them to understand in what populations, under what circumstances, what dose, and all that. So that's the second part, the toxicology assessments, where they did gigantic deception. What they did in the first thing in the biodistribution, so when we're looking at where the drug ends up in the body, they replaced the payload with a surrogate.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's too hard to believe.
Yeah, so they took lipid nanoparticle, instead of putting mRNA coding for spike protein, which is the payload in their drug, declared drug, they inserted something irrelevant. It's a protein. It's a mRNA coding for luciferase, which is a protein that makes fireflies glow.
There's where that came. Is this really where this came? This whole luciferase thing came from? Okay, now I know.
So that's essentially you can. Yeah, it makes it technically easier to see where the tissue, where in the tissue it ended up, because it will glow. But that's just a technical step. You can't say you can do that for technical reasons. And if you wanted to do first study like this to just see and easily measure, that's okay. But you still have to actually load your vehicle with what you're going to be giving to patients and do the same thing. And also, once you've detected, and then when they did this thing with the luciferase, they detected the lipid nanoparticles carrying whatever they're carrying, going to all organs of the body. And major ones, it was going into the liver in gigantic quantities, spleen, ovaries, brain, the adrenal glands, pretty much every organ was hit. And then at the end of the study, when they terminated the study, the concentrations were still going up. So they were not even studying to full clearance. And so they detected all this with the luciferase. And then they said, here's the table with numbers. And then in the next section, they said, safety pharmacology, which is where they would have then studied what happens with these organs. They said, by the way, safety pharmacology doesn't apply to us. We don't need to do it because WHO guidelines from 2005 for vaccines said that you don't need to do it for vaccines. That was the extent of it.
Okay, so there's two real big whoppers in here. Mm-hmm. One, they first of all saw using the luciferase where it glows so you can see it. It's like a tag marker. It's a tag marker.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That the mRNA doesn't stay in your arm like they said. It stays locally, produces an immune response, but the actual agent itself, the payload, stays in the local area. They knew that was a lie because they have evidence of the luciferase going into every organ of your body. Uh-huh. Okay, so that's number one. And then number two, by just calling it a vaccine when actually it's a drug, a gene therapy, a novel agent, all of these things, they just went, but the WHO has this vaccine exemption, so we'll just ignore that data. So we'll just ignore that data because we don't need to publish it.
Yeah, exactly. And that also blows my mind that they did that and FDA did not push back. WHO doesn't approve drugs in the United States, doesn't approve drugs anywhere. It's a non-governmental advisory body, okay? So they may issue whatever guidelines they like, but for FDA, call themselves professionals, read this nonsense and agree with it, to me, that was just mind-blowing. Also, FDA has published guidances for gene therapies starting in 1998. So there are dozens of specific FDA guidances for gene therapy class. And the most recent ones are from 2013 and 2015. And they list a very large number of known risks, which we are now all recording in VAERS, the same things. and I'm sure you're seeing in patients. So all of those things are recorded by FDA as known risks for this class. So they knew. Then Pfizer goes and says, oh, no, disregard your guidance from 2015. We're just going to use WHO guidance for 2005 and pretend like none of this applies to us.
Yeah, this just sounds like a drunken frat party,
Uh-huh.
Where everyone gets wasted and you say to your girlfriend, I know I slept with the other 5 girls at the party, but that's okay because I'm playing by the frat house rules, and because we're in the frat house, that's okay. If we were in the sorority house, no, then I could only sleep with you. Like, it literally is drunken party time. Like, I can't get over this.
And the FDA is like the parents there at college. I'm not going to pay attention
No,
because I don't want to know.
The FDA are the guys driving the beer truck, backing the kegs up to the house.
Okay, you're right.
Everyone was young. Yeah, you don't want your kid dying of alcohol poisoning or getting an STD.
Yeah, that's what they did. They just pretended like this nonsense meant something scientific and stepped away. And I don't believe they're incompetent. They have 19,000 employees, the FDA does. They're pharmacologists and toxicologists, PhDs. They've seen all kinds of submissions, hundreds and thousands of submissions like this. This has never happened before. And they just sit back and do nothing and pretend like this is okay. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that's the hard part, because I always reference the meme, I tried to follow the science and it always led back to money. But there's still something about this that smells more than just money.
It's more than just money. Yeah.
Because the risks that these companies are taking, companies have ceased to exist because of lawsuits. Purdue Pharma is entirely destroyed. Multi-billion-dollar a year company. Dow Chemical shut down their medical device subdivision as a way to get out of paying they paid massive amounts of money out, but to not crater the entire Dow Chemical company, which is like 150 years old, over the factitious breast implant suits back 25 years ago. So this is enormous risk to screw this up. And so somebody gave the toddlers a gas barbecue and an unlimited number of matches. And I just don't see why you would do that unless you really want to burn the house down.
Yeah, at this point, I long ago just saw that this is not about money anymore. This type of behavior, this type of corruption and fraud, and everywhere you look, it's not money. It's something much more sinister than that. They're making gigantic amounts of money, so I don't know that if you made 50 billion, do you need another 50 billion? So to behave like this recklessly, when you're making a lot of money, you're a target for lawsuits, but they're violating everything blatantly, lying, continuing to lie as if they know that they're invincible. So and maybe they are invincible. I don't know, because FDA is on their side, DOJ lawyers are arguing on their behalf. I don't know. So they probably merged with the government. I told my husband before, I said, I believe U.S. government is Pfizer now. Yeah. We don't have U.S. government.
How can you not go to that next step and believe that?
Yeah, it's great. So good job on winning World War II to give it back to the Germans 70 years later. Yeehaw. Storming the beaches of Normandy.
So you can't have been like the only one that's gone through this in detail. I mean, what I'm thinking, is anyone else going to be talking and coming up with the same points as you? And what can happen from here? I mean, once this all gets released.
Right. Various people have been I was disappointed at how few people were able to speak about this, which is it's very obvious, blatant fraud. I'm in touch with Dr. Mike Eden. We've been corresponding, and he's on the same page, and also with pharma background. I've met a few other pharmaceutical, but there's really a handful of people from pharma R&D who are speaking up on this, at least in some aspects of it. And so far, I know of maybe 3 or 4 people, including myself. And so that's extremely disappointing, extremely difficult. We're going to have a conference May 21st 4th, I think. Yes, in Palm Beach, Florida. And this will be, there are tickets available. There are tickets available. I'll send you the web link after this, and you can publish if people are interested. So we're going to have a conference with myself, Dr. Mike Yoden, Dr. David Martin, and Karen Kingston, and will be moderated by Jane Ruby. So we're trying to highlight this particular aspect and speak about what's happening with pharma. In my opinion, we cannot trust FDA right now. We cannot trust any drug that's been approved, let's say, in the last few years and going forward until this is investigated and resolved. Because as of now, we do not have a regulator in the pharmaceutical space. They can put whatever they like. If this is possible, think of other medications.
Oh, yeah.
Think of other vaccines. How are you going to make sure that they are actually doing their job and monitoring safety and efficacy? They're clearly not.
No, why would you trust anything
why
ever
would you
again?
trust this? Yeah, so at this point, and I'm telling all my friends and relatives, don't take any new drugs, only generics and no injections, and just be very careful because whatever they're putting out there is not being monitored at all.
And that's the thing. Back to the drunken frat party. Who's really to blame? Right? When you have irresponsible youths but you're the parents backing up the beer truck, who's really like when I looked through your article, I was like, I can at least make a motive for Pfizer that at least is rational. Okay. Because we set this up in such a way with Operation Warp Speed where we invited corruption. Because what you said is, you said to these companies, if you can produce a EUA approvable drug by a certain time, you get a non-bid contract of a certain amount of money. So you're guaranteed money. You don't have to, do marketing and advertising because we're going to do that for you. And, oh, by the way, you're not going to be liable legally because it's an EUA. So you gave them all of these things and then you expect it to not be corrupted. Like I had a discussion with somebody the other day, and the person was having some pain and whatnot and making it difficult for him to do his daily activities. And I said, if somebody came to you and said, you have to chop wood for 12 hours a day for the next week, and we'll give you $100 million, I said, you would go get heroin if you had to do that.
Yeah.
And so to expect that they weren't going to come up with anything when you had non-bid contracts, and to expect that somehow it was going to be minty fresh with zero corruption was almost impossible to believe.
Yeah, they had nothing to lose and everything to gain, and it's just, let's just get something together.
It was, and they knew what they were putting into it. So it's even more sinister. So it's not just, okay, let's just put whatever we have in the lab into the vial and ship it out because we have no liability. No, 4 of them decided on one particularly bad target for design of the vaccine. It's the most toxic part of the virus. It's extremely difficult to get rid of. They've engineered it to be very stable and engineered it to be almost indestructible. It's very toxic. It causes blood clotting. It causes all sorts of issues. Yet 4 of them simultaneously design vaccines to that target. And all 4 of them get this fast track and red carpet rolled out, while at the same time were other vaccines, more traditional vaccines being designed, I know for sure, by Sanofi, for example, that has gone nowhere. And so even from the IP perspective, when competing companies, supposedly competitors on the market, which those are, and they're very sensitive about their IP positions, they tend to avoid this kind of thing. They tend to go after different targets because otherwise you are all in the one IP space and then you're infringing on each other and then you're going to be in courts forever. And here we have all of them saying, oh, yes, this is a great target. We're all going to design there. And a very similar design, very similar everything. They're obviously utilizing very similar IP. And I have to believe this is some kind of a more bigger plan, because how can you plan everything like this at the same time and it was quick. It was very quick.
Then you start, my brain, from what I've listened to, starts going down that, well, was it, obviously they've developed these, you hear about the bioweapons technology, obviously that you have to know that exists throughout the world. And what, are they sneaking this in purposefully? Is there some big master? Sounds crazy, but a big master plan, somebody trying to thin the population.
Well,
then you get into the whole world
right.
reset. And we
Great
could go on
reset,
from
world
there.
economic. Yeah, no, there's an infinite number of bunny trails. And the thing that I've always said, which is one of the only truisms I believe in the whole world of COVID, is if somebody speaks with absolute authority, they're lying. Because we're sitting here having this conversation for the last hour, and we're both saying, why would they do that? We don't have a clue. It's all conjecture. We know about what they've written. We can interpret the science that's in black and white. All these motives. People come out and say, I know the motive is the mark of the beast. And I'm like, okay, until you show me that, I'm not going to believe you, and I'm going to think you're nuts. But now I look at absolutely everything, because I used to dismiss things with no thinking. Now I've been forced to really think deeply about a lot of this stuff. But the thing that's amazing, and I don't know if you know this story, is this happened almost exactly the same before. When they rolled out the polio vaccine it was right around 1955. It was the 10th anniversary of FDR's death, and he had polio. And there was this massive political pressure to get a polio vaccine. So the Salk vaccine comes out. It's a killed virus vaccine. It was, from a laboratory perspective, very effective. It appeared to be safe, killed virus, traditional vaccine that we've been using since the time of Jenner. But what happened was, when they went to manufacture it, they used Cutter Labs in Berkeley, and they never did correct quality control on the actual product that they were dispensing to all these children for the vaccine. It ended up being very dangerous. It caused a bunch of cases of polio. It causes a few deaths. The head of the NIH had to resign. There was this huge backlash. But then the story gets even better. So then we moved to the Sabin vaccine, which was a live attenuated vaccine. So technically less safe, maybe a little bit more effective, but definitely less safe. You're going to get vaccine-associated polio with it. But they didn't have tissue culture back then like we do now. So they used simian brains to culture the vaccine. So they used they're using this monkey broth. And one researcher who was like a whistleblower, actually a woman, which was amazing because it's like 1957 and she was a high up PhD. And she's like, monkey viruses are really bad because certain monkey viruses that are completely inert in monkeys cause cancer in humans. So they're like, whatever. They discredited her. She lost her job, the usual stuff. So they crank out this vaccine that actually had an oncogene in it. So in other words, a cancer causing viral contamination. And they used that from like 1955 till 1963 and immunized millions of kids with a contaminated polio vaccine. Everyone touts polio as the greatest vaccine in the world, and worldwide, maybe it was, I don't know. But it's not like this hasn't happened before, but it's also like, how come nobody knows that story? Like, it's an amazing story, and it's happening all over again, but on a way bigger scale.
Yeah, because the control of the media and propaganda that they have built, propaganda machine, that brainwashed millions and millions of people in thinking that vaccines are safe, vaccines are life-saving, and it brainwashed me too. I had all the vaccines. My children had all the vaccines, traditional ones. Now I rethink that. I don't think it's a good idea, especially knowing what's happening with FDA. I wouldn't vaccinate at all right now, actually, because now they can do these mRNA shots and not tell anybody, and have different versions of them and not tell anybody. So that needs to stop. But yeah, personally, I've gotten all the vaccines. My kids got all the vaccines, and we were never told any of this. And now I'm learning this, and I'm like, I think we were not informed. We were not given informed consent on all of it. So, and thanks to alternative media now, the story is coming out and more people are getting educated, especially, and unfortunately through personal, very bad experience with these COVID vaccines.
Yes. So to bring this home, we have been featuring this year courage, because the biggest disappointment we've seen in our own profession is an absolute total lack of courage. Like we just get in line, we do what we're said, we do what we're told rather. Like I envision the guy that used to work at a plumbing shop pulling the levers on the gas chambers is how everyone, it's just a job. I'm just doing what I'm told. And we're supposed to be healthcare professionals. We're supposed to be free thinkers. We're supposed to be intelligent. And honestly, sometimes I think the more educated you are, the less you think. It just makes me sad.
Yeah.
So we've been trying to, from all walks of life, featuring people this year on the podcast that are courageous. And you clearly are. Are you nervous bringing this out?
No. I'm not afraid at all. And you shouldn't be afraid. The problem is they control you with fear. That's how they control you. That's how they give you a gun and as a doctor and tell you to go shoot your patient. And you comply and you become a murderer because they've controlled you by fear.
Yeah, you're totally right.
But you're also protected by the doodles.
Yeah, I'm protected by the doodles. Yeah.
The doodles,
They're ferocious. They will kiss you.
You'll be kissed to death by a doodle.
Yeah.
No, but what an amazing, that's exactly right.
But I believe too, there's power in numbers that speak up together, honestly. And I wish, we have this podcast because we want people to be able to speak up. We encourage like our colleagues that, even on the front lines, this doesn't seem right. Let's get together and just say no and leave whatever corporate or whoever's telling us to do something we don't believe in, where we feel like we're selling our souls. And same with what you're doing. I just want more people to be able to, get your hands on that, speak up, share, even through that conference, which I'm really interested in now.
Since you'll be in Florida.
Talk about that. I would love to come, but that's what we're trying to do is empower people to be courageous, to stand up and not be afraid. And that's the only way we can take things back and help improve.
Just look at the example now. They were putting out these draconian mandates everywhere. Vaccines forever. You will forever have to take the shots to go travel or even leave your house. And look at this. They've lifted them. They never had legal basis. Anyone who fought, some people just said no and quit. And some people who maybe had some means hired lawyers and fought, and they've won. And because these mandates never had any legal basis, they're unconstitutional. And people who said no prevailed. We have 74 million people in the US. I've seen the statistics. 74 million people in the US are unvaccinated. So 74 million of us, obviously, are living fine. We're in a rich country still, regardless of what's going with the economy. We're still one of the richest places on earth. There are still plenty of opportunities to find job, employers are starving for people. Mm-hmm. So the world hasn't come to an end. We have 74 million people. It's a lot of people. And further, 150 million people said no to the second shot. So majority of the country is on our side. There are a lot of us. So start reaching out, start organizing, start talking to your colleagues, to your neighbors, to organize some groups, say no to the crazy mandates from your employer together, and then they're threatened, and then they can rethink their positions.
Exactly.
Yeah, the solution to bullying is punching the bully in the face, because they're a bully because they're weak. They're not a bully because they're strong.
That's what I taught my kids.
Yep. Fight back.
No, but you fight back appropriately. Yeah. That's the key. And
stand up for yourself and fight back. It's the only way to squash the enemy. No, exactly.
You got to fight for your right to party, just like those frat boys.
So I kept my long nails. I'm kidding.
No, so it's really, this has been absolutely amazing for our skeptical friends out there. They can verify this themselves. This is all data that you pulled from the FOIA requested information, which is out there, correct?
Is it easily accessible to everybody to read what you've published? And where do you find it?
I don't know if you have the website, you can post it. So you can post my paper. I can send you the original package of documents. It's been released by Judicial Watch. It's a very large, it's 14 megabytes file because it's 450. But I can share it with you and you can post it and people can read for themselves.
And then we can put the link to
because we're not into that. We want as much transparency and BS freeness as possible. Thus, the name of the podcast. And so, we'll post everything. We'll post your paper, which actually is an easy read. I thought it was not, because some of the stuff you read in, it's deep in the weeds statistically. It's very difficult for people to understand.
And even those of us who can understand, if we take our time going through, it's like a biochemistry upper level. Yeah. I'm just like, no, I don't want to do this again. I'm done.
It's good. It's about 10 pages, so it's not arduous by any means. It breaks all this down. We can have the original source documents there too, which I think is fantastic.
And then there's more to come, correct?
No, there's only
yeah.
another
Because this is the
90,000
only-
pages.
That's
to
what
come.
I mean. I know there's so much. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah, I already have access to the same package for Moderna and Janssen. I'm going through that right now. I can't quite release that yet, but I can tell that they all use the same strategies that I'm showing here, like the replacing payload with surrogates and that kind of BS. And also Moderna is much worse than Pfizer as far as it's just garbage. Janssen I haven't seen yet, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be bad as well.
This week they pulled Janssen for almost everybody, because of the clotting risk. And it's just like, the clotting risk isn't because it's a viral vector. The clotting risk is the freaking spike protein.
Yeah. Yes.
And the best vaccine at making spike protein is Moderna. It has the highest doses of spike protein payload. So it's not McFly.
Yeah, and wasn't that the highest dose or highest incidence of myocarditis in adolescent males? I believe that the data shows that too. Yeah,
it all correlates perfectly. So we will link all of that information. You may meet May in person here in the next little while. I actually am going to Florida with her, but I'm visiting some friends in another state. At
that time at the conference, he'll be gone, but I will be around.
Yeah, and
I would love to
tell you how unconditionally she loves me. May 24th is our 30th anniversary, and I won't be there.
Oh, congratulations! Almost.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know. He can get a pass this year, but next year, 31.
Yeah, 31. Well, yeah, that's what is that?
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
What anniversary is that? Is that like manganese or
is
something?
Is that the diamond one or?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the Tesla one.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, there's a lot of rare earth minerals. Thank you so much, Sasha, for joining us. This was great. I know I gleaned a ton of information from this, and I think our listeners are going to love it. I think their minds are going to explode. I think that we're going to do our best to promote this as much as we can, because people need to understand how this completely changes everything. Yeah. If this gets into the public vernacular, this changes everything. This should be massive governmental probes, huge lawsuits, inability to produce. Pfizer shouldn't exist, in my opinion. And I agree with you. The FDA shouldn't either. It should be completely revamped.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you soon in Florida. I'll send you all this information. If your viewers, readers want to ask questions, feel free to forward to me. I'll try to respond, or we can do a follow-up. And so always happy to help explaining this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm speechless. Is there much more to say? There's so much more to say, and yet there's nothing to say. That was amazing. I'm sure people's jaws are being lifted up with both hands, and their eyes are bulging out of their head. Wow. I knew it was bad, but not like this.
And this has been my contention in some of the crazy side. With what's gone on, you don't need to go to crazy town. Okay. You don't need to go to crazy town and talk about crazy things in water or whatever the conspiracy theory is, an RFID chip or whatever. You can use their own source documents against them. And that's a far more damning argument. And honestly, it's far more terrifying, because the collusion with which the FDA has worked with these pharma companies is horrifying. The wolves are literally guarding the sheep pen, which should give everyone not just pause, but freaking out. This information, if it gets out to enough people, I imagine it's August 6, 1945, and you're in Hiroshima, and you go, oh, there's a thing dropping from the sky from a parachute. It seems to be dropping very slowly. Maybe they're dropping more leaflets on us. And 3 minutes later, 100,000 people are vaporized. This is atomic bomb levels of corruption. And
all I can say is I can hardly wait to keep in touch with her. And like I said, hats off to her for reading through all of that information, because that's a lot of, you really have to have your eyes wide open and pay attention and read through what I call a lot of drivel, and certainly stuff that just doesn't capture my interest, but just to be astute enough to note the footnotes, all the little details, and be aware for all the hidden stuff that they really tried to hide in there. So for all the people doing that work, I applaud them and thank them, because we need people like that to do it.
And that's why there
so
isn't.
I can hardly wait to, keep up with her to find out what she unpacks in the next section.
Oh, in the next 90,000 pages. Yeah. And that's why there's not so many people doing this, because the job is arduous. She's in a position where she is not working a regular job, but has all of this experience. And you listen to her, and she sure sounds like an honest broker to me. This is not some listen to me and then I'll sell you some secret potion that's going to cure you from this. It's like, holy hell, what happened? We got to save the country.
So we'll let you decide. You've heard it. I'll put the references in, and there will be more to come, I'm sure. And I'm going to make an attempt to try to see what I can do about getting to that meeting when it happens in Florida, since I will be down there. So I'll keep everybody posted and abreast of the happenings there for sure. Meanwhile, share this episode for sure with people that are interested in this topic that I think this is going to be big, and it's going to get bigger. And like we complained about before, we had Peter McCullough and Harvey Risch on our show before it hit Rogan, and then Rogan got all the hits. So we'll see what happens.
No, Sasha 100% needs to be on Rogan for 3.5 hours. He will literally have to light a massive bong to not want to just beat his head against the wall.
So remember, you heard it here first.
Once again, BS Free MD, first to market,
last to be recognized.
Exactly.
So if you'd like to recognize this show, help get us out there, we would appreciate any sponsorship. I want to mention we do have a link and affiliate with our friends at Cabinet Health. They have amazing, sustainable, over-the-counter medications that you can get to put in your cabinet and avoid all the garbage and plastic that comes with those bottles, as well as easy refills and quality products. I am using them myself. So is Tim. The melatonin, it is life-changing. I'm just going to say.
It is.
I could never wait.
Coma in a capsule.
Coma in a capsule, but also I'm waking up refreshed, and I'm waking up by myself at the same time within 10 minutes every day. It is freaky. And I was one of those people that May don't wake up until she's staggered to the coffee machine and sat for an hour. And even then it was like, yeah. And I'm waking up feeling like I'm feeling pretty good. Still have my coffee, but it's the melatonin is a big deal. And we talked about that in our talk on hormone secrets. So I really like Cabinet Health. You can use the code BSFree15 for 15% off your first order. So don't forget to use that. Really try it out. You can get really cool starter packs, individual packs. It's a great company. It's, I think, going to just blow up. They're partnering with Grove and on the Thrive Market. So if you know those, you know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, send us your comments, questions, concerns. We love them. We've had lots of listener reach out, and anything else you'd like to hear as topics, we are open and welcome.
Absolutely. And we'll try to put the BS free spin on it, which means there's no spin because there's no BS. Thank you, Bill O'Reilly, for the no spin version of that.
All right. See you next time. Until then.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
While we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible, we can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.